You've no doubt heard the hype around the mythical Claude Fable 5. Before you jump on that hype train, I tested it on a streaming camera build for remote collaboration. Here's the unfiltered truth on how useful it really is from a 15-year hardware history. As we dive off into part selection with Claude Fable 5, it basically says a Raspberry Pi is capable of doing what you want it to do, but it's not capable of doing it by itself. No other model we've seen has given that hey, look, this other thing can do it, but it can't do it by itself right off the jump, and so you're going to have to purchase more things in order to get it there. I just want to push this to the forefront. We haven't seen that anywhere. Grok did that a little bit because it would choose parts and then it would ask questions, but it was never explicit like this. And so that's a really good thing to say, hey, here's what we think from the beginning, but just know, based on how you answer these questions that we're about to ask you, it may change the options that we give you. It gives you that right from the beginning. In addition, it also corrected a previous problem that 4.7 had in that it would mismatch generations. The problem came in when it would recommend an NVMe solid state drive that was a generation ahead. That was extra money that you didn't get the benefit of. And here, there is an explicit line that even says, don't buy the latest NVMe solid state drive. It's not worth it. It's a generation ahead. It gives you that directly. So I don't know if they're watching my videos. They probably should. But they directly applied that previous generation failure and improved it in Fable 5. So we've seen all different flavors of how they treat the budget itself as it asks these questions and it gets a budget. All of these models kind of treat it differently. Some push it right to the end and say, you wanted $900. We're going to spend that $900. And here's exactly what we're going to do it on. Some kind of land in the middle, and that's exactly what Fable 5 did here. We talked a little bit about lighting last week with Gemini 3.5 and how important lighting is for object detection. And so it gives you some options there, but it sits kind of nicely in the middle of the range. It gives you the ability to go. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Now, it does assume that you have some parts laying around. And we've seen this in other models. This isn't new, but that continues here. I wouldn't call it necessarily a bad thing. You could work that out if you set this up directly for you. You could say, don't assume I have anything, or you could give it your entire inventory list and say, here's all the things that I have. Don't go try to buy these things. Either way, if you wanted to set this up for yourself. But because it lands in the middle and it makes these assumptions that you have some things laying around, it's not a big deal. It left like $100 on a $600 budget. It leaves you that wiggle room to where at the end of the day, you're still going to fall within that range. The bad part about Fable 5, as with every Claude product that we've tested, every Claude model that we've tested, is that 3 questions still isn't enough. It will never be enough, ever, to get to a rock solid build exactly what I want. You could prompt it to ask you more questions. You could iterate back and forth quite a bit before you dive off into where you should buy all these products. You could ask it questions and let it give you answers. You have the ability to iterate, but 3 questions off the bat, not enough. It'll never be enough, but that's what we're testing here. We're testing it out of the box to see what happens and compare it to everybody else. And so I think that's a limitation. We talked about it a little bit. It seems to be intentional, but it is what it is. And so they've made that decision. It's probably not going to change. So we just move on down the road. The only other even close to bad thing when it comes to part selection with Fable 5 is that with ChatGPT, we talked a lot about kind of the small, medium, large and picking your own adventure. And they did a good job, at least with the large parts, of saying, here's 3 options. Let us know which path you want to go down. It affects all of these other things. You don't get that here. We don't see that in a lot of places, but specifically in ChatGPT, we did. And so we try to compare equally across all of these different models. It's not at the highest level. I would say those are really the only 2 even relatively bad things. One's intentional and one's not the end of the world, if that tells you anything. So that's how part selection shakes out. It improved over 4.8 in the part selection regard. But as we get into where to buy, 2 things actually we've never seen before. The Amazon links actually work. That's crazy, right? I was just crushing Amazon on all of our socials because they don't work with any of these models. Literally the same week. I posted that video a couple days ago. I feel like an idiot, right? No, I don't. I don't feel like an idiot because that was true up to that point. But the same week that happens, Fable 5 gets re-released and the Amazon links work. That's a great thing. You know my opinion. I don't like to buy hardware at Amazon. It's more expensive, but at the end of the day, Amazon's a huge retailer. Normally when we buy stuff from them, it shows up the next day, sometimes the same day. So that's a huge, huge benefit if you gotta have it. That's a really good thing. It's so awesome. I'm really happy that the Amazon links actually work. It'll make a huge difference in the trust when I click on a link and it actually works. So the Amazon links work. Most of the other links work too, by the way. It's not just the Amazon links. All the other retailers worked. But the other interesting thing that it did when it comes to a parts list specifically, I've never seen this anywhere. We've noted how difficult this is in previous videos, specifically ChatGPT. We talked about it a lot because there was some wonky stuff that was happening there. Go watch the video. It's on YouTube. But it talks directly about high demand, limited availability, and even potential back orders. And if you know anything about hardware, if you bought a lot of hardware, you know how big of a deal that is. Fable 5 didn't try to help you manage that, but it called it to your attention, which I think is a really good indication of what's to come in the future and how it can manage inventory in the future for hardware in ways that other systems can't. This is the first model that's ever talked about any inventory at all and whether it's available and whether it's not, or whether you should buy it in the store or whether it's on back order, even to the point of saying that a specific retailer had a limit of 4 for this specific part. Like, that's a huge deal. In my opinion, the next step is you understand inventory. Now let's understand shipping. What's the cheapest way to get all of these parts here, regardless of what the price is listed on the retailer? What are the taxes and the shipping and the lead times? What does all of that look like? It's an immensely complex operation called logistics. And so, like, I don't want to trivialize it, but to even say that they called it out and that they're thinking about it, it's a huge deal. We haven't seen that anywhere, not even with 4.8, which is one of the better models out in the wild right now. That is a really big thing. If they nail that in the future, it'll be a huge deal for everybody that buys hardware. It will, definitely. Now, that may be a year or two down the road. I don't know. Maybe they'll release it tomorrow. I have no idea. The fact that they're even thinking about parts and availability, it speaks to where we're headed, specifically with Claude, assuming we don't regress. Bad parts about part selections, pretty normal stuff. Like, there was one bad link. It did try to put multiple miscellaneous products into the same line item. Now, it didn't generate a document this time. We've seen previous models generate that actual parts list document. I feel like I repeat myself over and over. You can get it to make you a bill of materials if you so choose and you want to keep prompting it 45 times. You can make that happen. You can have it look exactly like you want it. That's not difficult. Out of the box, it's kind of went back and forth. I think that's probably one of the bigger detractors, is that it doesn't function the same every time. When I open up a spreadsheet system and I type out a formula and I hit enter, I always want the same output, but it's jumped back and forth a little bit. It hasn't trended in a direction. Sometimes it'll do documents and it'll do them really well, and sometimes it won't. Here it didn't. Again, they still produced a parts list, but that broken link was never going to work when you try to shove 4 or 5 miscellaneous items into it. We talked a little bit in the parts selection about not having things because it just assumes that you've got some stuff laying around like an SD card, which, to be fair, I do. By and large, I would say it was an improvement. Just the fact that we've got Amazon links working now because Amazon's a huge retailer, and the fact that we now have some semblance of understanding about inventory levels at different retailers, that's a big deal. As we get into build instructions and we think about the good things that it's doing versus the bad, most of these models hit the high parts well when it comes to build instructions. They know this is a desktop streaming camera. They know that you need a camera, and they know the camera needs to mount to a boom. Some of them, Gemini 3.5, some of them don't understand that minor detail that there has to be a way to connect those two things. And Fable 5 does a good job of hitting those details. So most of the models hit the high points. Very few models do well in the minor details of talking through things like brackets and cable ties and how to route things over the boom and where to attach. Fable 5 does a much better job at probably any other set of build instructions that we've seen except 4.8. 4.8 knocked build instructions out of the park. You should watch that video. The other good thing that it did was verifying that parts work. So plugging it in and testing it before you try to dump all the code and use it in the way in which you intended to. This is a pretty standard procedure for hardware where you get something in, you turn it on, you see that it works, and then you go build with it. I will say, as we go to the bad section, it did that out of order. We went through all of the build process and then it verified. You would never fully build out a system and then turn it on for the first time and be like, oh shoot, I've got to return something and I've got to disconnect all of this stuff. That is why you verify it first before you put it all together. This is not complicated. This is pretty standard operating procedure everywhere. You don't want to get these components because sometimes they get damaged. And the last thing you want to do is have a board that's in the middle of a stack. And now you've put it all together. Maybe you've even made it permanent or made it really hard to get to. You turn it all on for the first time and you realize that something's broken. You got to take it all back apart. You risk damaging all of the different components, not just the one that doesn't work. So you always want to do that. And so it does not do a good job at understanding that the verification comes first and then you go build all of the parts. We've seen different models handle this different ways. It sort of went backwards from Opus 4.8. In general, in terms of build instructions alone, it felt like all of Fable 5 had reverted back to 4.7 level type of instructions in its arrangement and the way that it talks about things and the order that it talks about things. Now, the layout is a whole separate thing. It did not produce an engineering level document, as we raved about 4.8 doing. A couple of caveats. It got released, the US government pulled it down, and then it's been re-released with extra protections. It's hard for me to tell. It's impossible, actually, to know whether or not some of those reversions are reversions because it got absolutely nerfed by the US government, or if that was the way it was going to work all of the time. I don't know whether or not the build instructions felt that heavier than other places. I doubt it. My guess is that it's just at the 4.7 level. That's a pretty big caveat. We're unsure of how much this thing got nerfed. If it didn't, it's just not as good as 4.8. Is it better at other things? Yeah, we see that in a couple of places, specifically in inventory. As I said, it's going to be a huge deal. That's what Fable 5 looks like. I would say that if you intend to go build something with Fable 5, you better do it now. It's going back offline, I think, on July 7th. So if you want to use it, you got to use it now. Use it now, feel what it's good at, what it's bad at. This is what it looks like in terms of hardware. That's all for this episode of SmokeTest with Claude Fable 5. Hey, if you're watching to this point, you might as well hit that like and subscribe button. Help the channel out. My name is Brandon. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.